Let's have a look at LODs. So level of detail. Level of a detail is the idea that as an object gets further away from you, it doesn't need to display as many triangles. The textures don't need to be as complicated. We can simplify it as it moves further away. In, for instance, first-person shooter, I may have mentioned it was always funny playing Battlefield, and the game would start and all of the LOD levels would load from simplest to most complex. And sometimes I'd start the game if my connection was really slow, and the characters around me that would be running beside me would be like these cardboard cutout silhouettes. And those would be those characters that level of detail would be used for when they are this little dot off in the distance. They were literally just a cardboard cutout, essentially. They've been reduced down to that. So it's kind of neat to see that in action. You can also often see when you play video games, you can see the detail sort of pop in sometimes, especially when the game loads. But sometimes when you're running around or doing something, you'll suddenly see more finite, like things like plant life or sort of fine details suddenly come on screen. And that's the level of details kicking in, saying that, hey, you're close enough now that we can display more stuff to you. So I've set up an LOD on my water tower here. So right now what you're seeing is the water tower in all its glory. And you can see as I move away from it, there's actually a bit of a pop happening with the textures on the legs and up here. And that's because the poly count's actually getting reduced. And I've used vertice colors to blend textures together. So as the vertices vanish, you're actually seeing some of that detail go away. Um, and then eventually, I don't know if we're going to see it again, but back here somewhere, it drops again, but it's so far away that we don't see it. It's really not causing a problem as we're far away. It's actually reducing a third time, and so we're only seeing that one pop, and we could go and play with that sort of near distance for the first step down, and make sure it happens far enough away that we can't see it. That way, when we've got water tower across the far side of the map like this one, or this one over here, it could be much lower quality than what it is here. We can even load in totally new materials at a distance to say, hey, all these complex materials we've got that make it look fantastic with all the animation on the burning legs and stuff, let's get rid of all that so we're not having to calculate any of that stuff. Let me show you how to set this up on my castle towers here because they're a disaster. Okay, this is kind of a bit of a bad idea. If you look at this close up, I'll go Alt 2 and go wireframe. You can see it's just really dense. This model is probably too dense to begin with. So here's the brick it was made from. And if I go wireframe, so Alt 2 again, you can see there's a fair amount of polygons in it. And so I could get some shape and form. This was an early asset I had added. And so you can see that it's, probably a little more complicated than what's necessary, but it does make it look nice up close. So, maybe we can get away with it up close. So what we're going to do is we're going to decimate my castle down lower. Now, this is the castle that I built from that stone and a piece of wood, and then I merged them all together. So essentially, I took a bunch of pieces that I had, and selected them all, and then went ahead and merged the actors into one piece. So I ended up with this castle tower asset now that we're going to work with. So I'm going to open up that castle tower, and so I've got it, and there's the density of it, which is just crazy. So it's having to draw all these triangles. Right now, there's 44,000 triangles in this mesh. And that means that even when it's all the way off to the other side of the planet, there's still 44,000 triangles in that mesh. And it's going to get, very heavy, especially if I had multiple of these guys, in my scene sort of thing. So let's go in and manage that. There's kind of three areas that we want to work with. There is the LOD picker area, so you need to identify that and find that section here. Okay, so LOD picker, and there's LOD settings here. Okay, and there's also the sections of texture. So there's actually a section where we can work with the different LODs for the materials. So again, for each LOD, you could actually change the material and simplify it and get rid of, in case of my burning wood, we can get rid of that burning wood texture, right, to be able to simplify it and whatnot. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to close up this because we're not going to work with the textures right now. Okay, we're going to take a look at the adding more LODs to it here. So if we go to the top where it says LOD auto and open this, you'll notice nothing opens. There's nothing in there. So there's only one LOD. That's the one we've got right now. There's just the original model essentially. If we roll down to LOD settings, we can see that we can import LODs. So we can actually make them in Max or your whatever DCC you're using, whatever, and import specific ones if you wanted. And the number of LODs. So right now there's only one. That's the original model. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up so that we actually have multiple. We've got 3 LODs. And I'm going to hit apply. Okay. And I'm going to turn off this auto compute distance. It's on by default. Let's turn that off. And I think I need to go in. Yeah, number of LODs. I got to turn that, hit that back. Make sure that says 3 and auto compute distance is off. And I'm going to hit apply changes. Okay, so that we've got now number of LODs reads 3 and my auto compute is off. Okay, and we're going to manage the distances ourselves, sort of thing, so we can set them up. Sometimes it'll make good choices, other times it doesn't. So under the back of the top again, under LOD Picker, you'll see LOD Auto. If we open that up now, you can see we got LOD 0. That's the one we're currently looking at, 1 and 2, and they've been calculated. So if we choose 1, here are the settings for 1, okay? Or the first one, sorry, 0. My apologies. The first one, 0. Arrays in programming language start at 0. So the first one, number 0, so we have see percent triangles is 100% triangles. So this is the model in all its glory, the way I'd originally made it. Screen size is the distance the screen size is that's going to start to display at. So at 100% screen size, so essentially this is a percentage, then we're going to see this one here. We're going to go down to LOD1 and set it up now. So screen size 0 has been chosen. So you can see that it's decimated it automatically down to 50% of the triangles. I'm going to set this to say we'll do it in thirds, and we'll work on thirds right now. So it'd be like 66% and screen size of 0.66. So we'll start with this sort of idea that a third, as we sort of move a third away from it, its screen size becomes a third smaller than it could be at full size. Let's decimate it down to a third of the triangle, let's decimate a third of the triangles out of the model, okay? So that we've got it. Now we just need to hit apply changes. Okay, and you can see that the poly count went up, but you can see that it's less than it is at the default. So we go back to LOD 0, there's the default, there's LOD 1, okay, so it's decimated some more. Let's go check out LOD 2, and it's even lower, 25 down to 25% of the triangles. Screen size, let's take that down to 0.33 of the size. And only when you decimate it do you have to hit apply triangles again. So if I change this and maybe up the value to 33%, I'd have to apply changes again. And now to see this in action, let's go back and turn on LOD Auto. So it's going to automatically switch them at these screen sizes to the percents that we've stored. So I want to say LOD Auto. So you can watch as I zoom back, it skips. When it gets to that 66% of its size, it skips to LOD1, and then as it gets further back, it'll skip down to LOD2, so it's getting smaller. What does that look like in the model? Well, we're going to see a change. You can see slight changes in the detail, and again, this has been vertex painted, so you can see as soon as the vertices become reduced, I lose some of that detail where I've painted. But again, how often do you see that in video games? All the time, because frame count, frame rate, I should say, is absolutely the most important thing. So we can see it happen here. So triangles up in the left-hand corner, we see 44,000, skips down to 30,000, and then it steps down to 14,000. So it's dropping a long way, okay? So it's going down to less than half the amount of polygons, and we could even take it down again if we wanted, so it decimates it even more. And in some cases, again, what you'll see is that, if you look at objects way in the distance, they literally become like virtually like this, become a cylinder almost, like it's really simplified. and they'll simplify the textures and everything. So let's see what that looks like in game. I'm just going to make sure I save that. Skip back over to the game. I'm going to zoom back, and we're going to see that decimate. So you can see it just sort of a little change right here happening. And then it changes again as we get further back. So that far one right now is the low quality. So this is the same castle over here. So as I zoom in on it, we're going to see it. I can barely see any changes on it. So what does it look like when we're playing? Because that's all important that we actually see these things during playtime. So right now, when I look over at that castle, that'll be the low version. And then as we start moving towards it, it'll up-res itself. And right there, I can see a bit of a pop happening with the vertices coming in. But big deal. So maybe I push it back a bit further. Maybe I don't reduce it quite as much for the very first one. And our frame rate should be going up for this sort of reason. Now you're going to need bake lighting again on this because it's going to have to store that data to be able to bake the lighting. So as soon as you make those changes, it's going to ask you to rebake lighting again, which you can see obviously up here in the red in the upper left-hand corner. There you go, LODs.